everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Transformers R.E.D. Robots Enhanced Design Transformers Prime Optimus Prime. Now these Transformers Prime characters have undeniably been the biggest hit that the R.E.D. series has seen. RC and Knockout, I think sculpt wise, were both fantastic, slightly wonky in terms of material and articulation, but overall definitely some of the best quality releases to come out of this series. So I'm definitely looking forward to this Optimus Prime and the eventual release of their version of Megatron, which I should have a review up over on the channel for fairly shortly. But taking a look here at the packaging for this particular Wave 7, I believe, we are seeing a complete redesign for the box. This completely eliminates any plastic, so instead of seeing the see-through window that we would usually have here on the front of the box, we now have a complete CG render of Transformers Prime Optimus, looking awesome, never looking better if I do say so myself. This is a non-converting action figure, and as we take a look here at the side of the box, much like Galvatron and Shockwave, this too is basically just kind of an illustrative piece of art showcasing some of the accessories that comes in this box. And then as we spin our attention here to the back, we get some super cool promo images of Optimus utilizing the blades, the dual blasters, the matrix of leadership, and surprisingly an interchangeable non-masked head sculpt. I really wasn't expecting that for this figure at all, so it does appear as if though they've gone all out. Here's hoping that the final release itself actually does live up to my expectations. So let's get Optimus out the packaging and take a closer look at the details. And so here we have Optimus Prime based on, of course, Transformers Prime, cracked open and out of the packaging, and sculpt and design wise this guy's turned out great. Even articulation is pretty decent, but sadly the area of which this guy lacks the most in would have to be paint. He looks super bland, super boring, and pretty cheap feeling in hand. I really do wish that some of the reds and definitely some of the greys, especially where the torso and thighs are concerned, were decked out in the same metallic silver as shown on the back of the box. As I just very quickly bring that in here for a comparison, as you guys can see, they actually look like completely different figures. This looks awesome. Had the figure been painted exactly the same as it's coming across here on the box, this would hands down be by far one of my favorite red figures. But as you can see, he definitely does look just so bland in person when in comparison to what's advertised here on the box. And considering that we don't actually get a see-through window here on the front, I kind of feel as if though this is false advertisement, as the figure really doesn't look anything like this in terms of the color deco. Now as we actually take a look here at Optimus, I think the sculpt work is amazing. They've done a really good job in capturing that very anime-esque quality that the Prime designs had, and surprisingly the head has actually been painted the best out of the entire figure. You can see we've got a wicked metallic silver for the mouthpiece as well as for the surrounding areas of the eyes. I really do think that looks great. Even the crest has got some nice metallic silver, and as we take a look here at the side of the head, both of the antennas too have been painted pretty nicely, and I think the shade of blue they've used for the eyes has turned out great. Really does capture that almost illuminating feel that you got from Optimus in that Prime series. So the head looks awesome. As we take a look here at the details for the top section of the chest, I also think this has come out great, but metallic silver definitely would have helped to have broken up some of this black sculpting in detail and just to make some of the sharper details pop. And the same can also be said here for these window sections. Had these pieces been picked out in silver, it would have looked so much nicer, but as it stands, the sculpt still isn't that bad. I preferably would have liked to have seen a metallic blue used here for the windscreen instead of black. I do just think this looks slightly boring, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually believe Optimus's chest was blue in the Transformers Prime show. As we take a look here for the lower section, we actually do get some nice metallic silver highlights here for these pieces, even for this section here, but the mid torso is just so bland looking, and I think it mainly has to do with the shade of plastic they've used. Had this been more gunmetal, something along the lines of the Takara First Edition Optimus, I think this would have looked heaps and bounds better, but as it stands, it is really just coming across as super boring in person. And the same can also be said for the finish here of the shoulders and for the forearms. Now this guy is actually one of the more heftier and better built red figures that I've picked up. The only squishy areas would be for the shoulders, and I understand that because it's probably due to the way he articulates and these lower forearms, but the legs are completely solid, as so is the chest piece and even this section, so he doesn't feel nowhere near as flimsy and lightweight as some of those previous figures. But this just looks super cheap. Had this been decked out in a nice metallic red, it would have looked so much nicer. But we do get some Autobot logos here on the top of the shoulders, which look great. As we spin our attention to the back, we do get the smokestacks, which too are in a dire need of some paint, and the same can also be said here for these lower sections. Surprisingly, the back of the legs have actually been painted better than the front of the figure. Personally, I would have much preferred this to have been grey plastic instead of the thighs and torso. They could have literally taken this silver and actually spiced up some of the details that we're seeing here for the front. But as we just take a closer look here, as you guys can see, very nicely painted as well as sculpted. I think the wheels look wicked, definitely in proportion with the rest of the figure. I think the arms look great. The front of the legs also looks pretty impressive, as so does the foot design. So sculpt work, I think this guy's for the most part pretty much flawless. Now as it comes to articulation, an area which has definitely been hit and miss with this Red series, I'd say this guy's actually pretty good. So here for the head, it can look up roughly to that far. It's merely just on a double ball peg and the neck is fixed into place. But it also can look down, it can tilt side to side as well as rotate left to right. The shoulders, despite them being a separate piece, will move in accordance with the main shoulder joint, so I thought that was pretty decent. You get a full range out of that, as well as a hinge joint roughly to 90. We surprisingly actually do get some butterfly joints, and you can see some nice mechanical sculpt work on these sections, so I thought that was a nice touch. Full rotation here at the bicep, as well as a double joint where the elbow is concerned, and you definitely do get way past 90, so that is a pretty decent range. The hands are a tricky one. There is a swivel as well as a hinge joint, but considering that the forearm as well as the hands have been cast out of that slightly pliable gummy material, it basically just goes to mush, and what ends up happening is you actually begin to stress out the plastic. You guys may be able to see right on the tip, I have actually stressed this out because this is just so flexible. It does not actually want to move that hinge joint at all, so even heating this up I don't think would fix it. Surprisingly on this side it actually does work a little better, I believe. So yeah, as you can see, this will hinge forwards and backwards, but this one is just way too pliable. Here for the torso, we get an amazing range, so this can crunch forwards that far as well as back to that far, hinge side to side as well as rotate the full 360, but due to the nature of the design, the smokestacks are a separate piece, so when you are manipulating that, you can see that they do just stay fixed in one place, which from certain angles definitely does look slightly bizarre. So I personally would have loved for them to have found a way to have actually stuck these here to these back sections so that they could have moved with the upper torso, as in the show I do believe they also do move with these sections. But nevertheless, definitely a great range where this torso is concerned. The hips can kick forwards that far, not quite to 90, and it would have been amazing had these been on drop down hinge joints, especially considering that the backward range of motion is pretty much non-existent. You cannot get Optimus kicking back at all. He can kick out to the side slightly, as well as can rotate here at the thigh, and we also do get a double joint at the knee, but due to the way it's being cut, really and truly it's basically just 90 no matter what way you actually bend these. So I do wish this too could have been ever so slightly redesigned. And then finally, as we come down here to this section, the foot guard is actually on a ball joint, so this here, as you can see in there, it will go forwards and backwards ever so slightly. The foot will pivot back as well as pivot forwards, and surprisingly we actually do get a pretty dynamic range going left to right. So overall, in terms of articulation, besides the stacks not being attached onto the back and a few issues I have in terms of the materials and maybe the hips, I'd say he's pretty well done. You can definitely get him into quite a few fair dynamic poses, and hopefully I'll be able to showcase that at the beginning act of the video. So with the robot mode pretty much covered, let's of course check out some of the accessories. And surprisingly, he actually comes with plenty of them. It is just a shame that the vast majority of them are pretty lackluster, so we may as well kickstart things off with the coolest one, that being one that is actually embedded within Optimus's chest, of course, the Matrix of Leadership. Now this is a detail which I personally would have never thought Hasbro would have implemented into this figure, and really is the saving grace of the accessories in my opinion. So in order to access the Matrix chamber, you are going to want to pull the shoulders back, basically take these chest windows, splay them out to the sides, and there we have the Matrix of Leadership that we actually see this guy use in order to take Unicron on with in that final episode for season 1. And this looks great. The painting and the sculpting in the chamber, as well as for the Matrix itself, looks fantastic. Now sadly, actually to get this out, 9 times out of 10 you will whack these side sections off, so you may as well just pull them off now, as there's really and truly no elegant way to get to the chamber. But as you can see, the Matrix is removable, and overall I think looks fantastic. Definitely my favourite accessory out of everything this figure comes with, and it can easily be pushed back in, and if yours don't pop off, then what you can do is just close up that matrix chamber very nicely, so that's awesome. Now sadly we turn to some of the more lackluster ones. So included are a pair of Energon Blasters. Not only have these not been painted at all, but they're just way too small. In the show they were definitely a lot chunkier, and I actually believe they were more black instead of gunmetal grey like we're seeing this time round. The sculpt work isn't too bad, it definitely does look pretty decent. I'll show you how these actually insert in just a second. First of all, I want to touch base with the swords. These are terrible. I think the sculpt work on these are diabolical. The paintwork also is atrocious. These are by far probably one of the worst accessories we've seen from the R.E.D series so far. They just look embarrassing. They're way too small. The sculpt work is pretty crap and the paintwork is atrocious, and they've been cast out of a super gummy pliable plastic. I've actually tried to heat these up multiple times to straighten them out, and no matter how many times I do it, they just want to revert back into this bent position. Now as far as their installation goes, there are some slots here on the side of the arm that basically they will just slide into. So to showcase that here for this side, there is Optimus with the arm blades looking terrible. These are not the accessories that I'll be choosing to display this guy with when on the shelf. Even when inserted, I really just think they look pretty embarrassing. And then we also do get included a pair of interchangeable hands, which are more so that you can actually grip the matrix when it's out of the chamber. They've been sculpted pretty decently, but much like the rest of the figure are severely lacking in any type of paint. And also we do get a interchangeable non-masked head sculpt, and I also was not expecting this to be packaged in. Sadly, the sculpt is a little soft there for the face piece, but overall been painted very nicely, and from certain angles definitely does look like Optimus as seen in the Prime show. And it's pretty simple to swap out. Basically you do just want to pop this head here off of the ball joint, and then take this new one and snap this here over the top, and that is the unmasked head sculpt attached onto Optimus's body. Not looking that bad at all. Now to go back to the blasters, you will want to remove the Energon blades, take the fists, pop these off, and do the same for this side. And these actually do just slide in over the top, and do the same for this side. And there we have Transformers Prime Optimus with the dual blasters. Looking a little better when in comparison to the arm blades, but still not 100% perfect. Definitely should have been bigger, and I really do think would have looked a lot cooler had they been cast out of metallic black. So sadly, definitely not great accessories, with the exception of the matrix. The blasters and the swords for sure were definitely in need of a rework. Taking a look here at some comparisons, here we have the R.E.D Optimus Prime compared alongside the Prime Universe RC, and scale wise it's not accurate to the show at all. RC should be a lot shorter, or maybe Optimus should be a little bigger. From the offset, as soon as they brought out that red Bumblebee, we knew that the scale was just thrown completely out of the window, but surprisingly he is actually a little bigger than RC. I was expecting him to be exactly the same height, so I guess that's something. In terms of sculpt work, I think they look great. I would have much rather had seen, however, the darker shade of grey that we've got here for this character implemented onto Optimus. I think that would have looked so much nicer when in comparison to the rather bright, bland grey plastic that we've got here for the finished figure. And finally, here he is alongside the Earthrise Optimus Prime. And so, some final thoughts for this Transformers R.E.D Transformers Prime Optimus Prime. Overall, I definitely think it's one of the better entries into the line, but I still don't think it's perfect. Articulation is still an area of which they need a major kick up the backside with. This guy should be on par with the likes of the Classified series in my opinion. Considering this is a line consisting of non-transforming Transformers, he should be a lot more articulated when in comparison to your actual transforming figures. Whereas here, I just think the range of motion out of the hips really isn't great, nor is the range for the knees. I think the sculpt work looks for the most part pretty nicely done. This guy's just massively lacking in paint. Had he been painted as nicely as some of those CG renders, I think it would have been by far my favourite R.E.D series to date, but as it stands in person, he really does look quite cheap and definitely really bland. The accessories, with the exception of the Matrix, are nothing to write home about. The swords as well as the blasters were definitely in a major need of a rework. They're just way too small, and in the case of the blades, I just think they're outright embarrassing. The interchangeable non-masked head sculpt is a nice inclusion, works easily enough, and definitely does resemble what we see on the show. And I guess if you're a fan of some of the previous R.E.D figures, then you're more than likely actually going to really like this guy. And if you're a Transformers Prime fan, this is probably one of the coolest looks that we've seen for this character in quite some time. Of course, it doesn't transform. I still think the best version of this character is the first edition version, but if you're looking for a pretty cool robot mode stand-in, then overall I think this is going to work out pretty nicely, especially if you do decide to custom paint him. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. I still have a review left for Megatron to go up over on the channel fairly shortly, so be sure to stay tuned to that. And until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.